Johnny Carson had talked to presidents, movie stars, and the biggest names in show business. Within 30 years of being on live TV, he had never lost his cool. He was quiet, had a hairdo, and a paintbrush. On a quiet Thursday night in October 1983, he walked onto the Tonight Show stage and said 4 words that made the king of late night cry in front of 40 million Americans. No one in charge of making the movie saw it coming. It was almost like the cameras stopped rolling. And Bob Ross told Carson a secret he had kept for over 10 years that night. It would change everything Carson thought he knew about being alone, having a purpose, and the one night that almost broke them both. Now, history doesn't always record the calmest times. The archives for The Tonight Show are not full. Some parts were never kept. There were talks that were not caught by the cameras. Some of what you are about to hear comes from 2 real lives. It thinks about the struggles they have been through, the things we know about them, the times they have kept quiet, and the talk that those things always seem to point toward. There are real facts about Bob Ross. There is truth to what you read about Johnny Carson. What they said and how they met are in the area where what we know and what we feel must have been true meet. What did those 4 words say? Why did Bob Ross, who was known for drawing happy little trees and saying that everything would be okay, keep a secret that would have made even the calmest man in TV history lose it? What did Johnny Carson do years ago that Bob Ross thought made him sure he had to tell him the truth no matter what? This one is not for you yet. Follow me. A lot of the time, people who aren't subscribed leave notes. Please check and make sure you are subscribed if you like the show. It's free, and it helps us keep the show going strong. Thanks for going on this trip with us. NBC Studios in Burbank, California, on October 6, 1983. There was a lot of controlled chaos in the Tonight Show production office. Writers were arguing over monologue jokes, guests were being rushed through makeup, and segment producers were checking and double-checking the show's run. Fred Cordova, who has been Johnny Carson's director for a long time, was looking over the guest list for the evening when his phone rang. He wasn't ready for the call. The speaker on the other end was calm and not in a hurry. It was patient, like someone who spent a lot of time alone in quiet places. The man introduced himself and said he was calling because he had to go on The Tonight Show. He said he wasn't calling to sell anything or because his publicist set it up. He told America that he had to talk to Johnny Carson in front of everyone because Johnny had to know something right away. For 40 years, Fred Cordova had worked in TV. He had heard every pitch he could think of, but there was something about this man's voice, a silence, a sense of urgency wrapped in gentleness, that made him stop writing and just listen. His name was Bob Ross. In October 1983, Bob Ross wasn't yet the famous figure that he would become. About a year had passed since The Joy of Painting first aired on PBS. His fans were small and loyal, but not at all like most people. In a meeting to book The Tonight Show, his name didn't stand out. His paintings of scenery were shown on public television, and he talked to the people who watched them as if they were old friends sitting next to him on the porch. It was almost a no from Fred Cordova. But something stopped him. He had a question for Bob Ross. Why is Johnny Carson the one? The line went silent for a while. After Bob Ross spoke, Fred put down his coffee and grabbed a notepad. He said that because Johnny Carson saved my life once and should know about it. That afternoon, Fred Cordova booked the part. What he didn't do, though. He said later that telling Johnny what was going to happen was the choice he regretted the most. Before you can understand what Bob Ross brought into the studio, you need to know where he came from. Bob Ross was born in Florida in 1942 in Daytona Beach. He stopped going to school when he was 17 and joined the U.S. Air Force. He served for 20 years and worked his way up to Master Sergeant, where he was in charge of a medical recording unit in Alaska. Americans would later fall in love with Bob Ross, the soft-spoken gentleman who talked about happy accidents and friendly clouds. This character was shaped in Fairbanks, Alaska, where it was 50 below zero and there was frozen silence for hundreds of miles in every direction. Bob Ross first painted while he was in Alaska. During his lunch breaks, he would set up little paintings. He painted quickly using a method he learned from another soldier called wet-on-wet oil painting, which let him finish a whole scene in less than 30 minutes. From his bunker window, he painted the mountains he could see. His painting showed the sky at 4 a.m. in January, when it was that strangely deep blue that tourists never believed was real. For him, art was the only thing that made the world quiet. But Alaska also taught Bob Ross something else, something deeper, that he had never talked about in public before. From 1971 to 1973, a little over 2 years, Bob Ross did not paint at all. It was true that he hadn't done much. He had only tried to stay alive. In 1983, no one who watched his PBS show knew this. Didn't see him smile and dab titanium white onto a canvas and say, "See, we don't make mistakes. We just have happy accidents." They knew that Bob Ross had thought there were no more happy accidents in his life at one point. There were no more mistakes, no more ends, and nothing but the vast, frozen silence of a world that no longer made sense. The part of this story that changes everything is what broke him open those 2 years. And the story starts with a TV in a small room in Fairbanks, Alaska, and a young talk show host who had just taken over The Tonight Show. However, no one on The Tonight Show production team knew what happened between Bob Ross and that TV set. When Bob walked through those studio doors and said it out loud, there was silence in the room. "Do not leave me now, what follows will break you." Bob Ross had lived through many Alaskan winters, but the winter of 1971 was the worst he could remember. His marriage was over. Steve, his young son, was a long way away. Without notice, the commanding officer who had been his teacher and best friend had been moved. And Master Sergeant Bob Ross of the U.S. Air Force, a man who had spent his whole adult life being strong, smart, and helpful, found himself in a one-room apartment in Fairbanks by himself, with nowhere to go and nothing to hold on to. He had stopped painting a long time ago. He couldn't stand to look at the paintings, so he leaned them against the wall with their faces down. His hands wouldn't work with him when he tried to pick up a brush. Something else had taken the place of the calm that painting used to give him. The heavy, airless kind that stays in a room after live things leave. He didn't eat much. He slept too much and then not enough. He did his job with the mechanical accuracy of someone who has learned to function on the outside even though something important has gone dark on the inside. Bob Ross sat in his apartment one night in December 1971, he would later remember the exact date as December 14th, and came to a conclusion that scared him, not because he had reached it, but because he didn't feel scared about it at all. He came to the simple conclusion that nothing he did or said ever mattered, and nothing he could do would ever matter. If he just stopped being in the world, it would keep spinning without even the slightest bit of interruption. After giving that thought a lot of thought, he turned on the TV because he didn't know what else to do. He wasn't really interested in anything he wanted to watch. He wasn't trying to find comfort or something to do. He was bored and didn't want to be alone in the room with his thoughts any longer. After going through chatter, news, and a grainy western, he finally found something that made him stop and think. A young man was talking while sitting at a desk. The young man wasn't doing anything very interesting. He wasn't making the world a better place. He was joking, but it was a nice, light joke about something small and common. The people in the room were laughing. It was also funny for the young man. And there was something in the way that laughter got through the screen and touched Bob Ross in a way that he thought was impossible. John Carson was the young man. The Tonight Show was on. Bob Ross had watched The Tonight Show before, just like everyone else who watches late-night TV. It was different for him that night. He looked at it in that way that men do when they have nothing to lose and nowhere else to look. He heard and laughed along with Johnny Carson as he talked and joked. What really surprised him was how interested Johnny Carson seemed to be in the people around him. He wasn't acting interested or making himself feel warm for the camera. He was really there, really curious, really interested. Bob Ross watched the whole show. After that, he watched TV the next night and didn't paint again for 3 weeks. He stopped sitting there in the dark, though. In the evenings, he started leaving the TV on. He slowly started eating and sleeping better again, and he got back to some kind of schedule. It wasn't anything exciting. In every way, it was the tiniest turn back toward the world. In the end, Bob Ross said that what Johnny Carson had given him wasn't really hope. Hope wasn't as loud as it was. It was proof that somewhere in the world there was real love and presence, a man who showed up every night and cared about the people in front of him all the way. There was enough proof there. It had been just barely, just right. That story had been told by Bob Ross for 12 years. No one else knew about it. Annette was his second wife, not her. Not his son Steve or the people at PBS who gave him the show. He had kept it to himself, like how people keep the things that are most true about them. He was about to walk onto the stage that the most people in the US watch on TV. He was going to say it out loud for the first time in 12 years. He did something crazy that you won't believe. Johnny Carson was in a good mood when he got to the NBC offices on October 6, 1983. The speech was short and sharp. He really liked the first guest, a comic. When everything was in its place, the show would sometimes feel easy. That night was one of those nights. He took a quick look at the list of guests and saw a name he didn't know in the second section. Bob Ross. His producer had put Painter PBS next to his name as a description. Johnny nodded, thought to himself that he should watch a few clips, and then he moved on. The clips were new to him. In general, he wasn't worried. He could start a chat with someone on the spot and figure out what they were interested in within 30 seconds. He was very good at it and almost no one else did it. If you put Johnny Carson next to a stranger, he would find something real in less than